Could a single piece of wax bearing the mark of a queen unravel kingdoms? Could a meticulously carved matrix plunge courts into chaos, deciding fates and forging fortunes? From the hushed chambers of medieval Europe to the bustling palaces of the Enlightenment, from the fateful year of 1586 and beyond to the power held within, a queen's seal was immense, and the temptation to wield it through deceit, often irresistible. Number 9. The Whispers of Whitehall and Queen Anne's Hidden Decree. The year is 1536. The air in Whitehall Palace, usually thick with the scent of roasted meats and expensive perfumes, was tinged with something sharper: fear. Queen Anne Boleyn, once the dazzling jewel in Henry VIII's crown, was imprisoned in the Tower, her fate hanging by the thinnest thread. Amidst the frantic political maneuvering and the whispers of conspiracy, a shadowy plot began to unfurl, one that sought to seal Anne's doom, not with the king's heavy hand, but with a clever twist of deceit, involving her own small personal seal. This seal, a delicate piece of silver etched with her initials, A.R. for Anne Regina, and surmounted by a small crown, was used for her most private correspondence, for letters to her closest ladies, or for minor household directives. It was never intended for matters of state, yet it became the linchpin of a dangerous game. Lord Reginald Talbot, a man whose loyalty swung with the prevailing winds of court, saw an opportunity amidst the turmoil. He had always been a quiet supporter of Catherine of Aragon, the queen Henry had set aside for Anne, and he harbored a deep resentment for Anne's rise. He knew of a certain document, a small land grant in Kent, which Anne had recently signed off on a minor detail in the grand tapestry of royal finance. The document itself was innocuous, but Talbot saw its potential. His plan was simple in its conception, fiendish in its execution. He needed to create a new document, one that appeared to be from Anne herself, giving a direct order to a minor official in the royal treasury to divert a significant sum of funds actually intended for the king's own privy purse, into a specific account held by one of Anne's supposed co-conspirators. The sum was large enough to be suspicious, but not so gargantuan as to scream immediate forgery. The intention was to provide proof of Anne's avarice and her supposed plot to secure wealth for her alleged lovers, thereby further blackening her name in the king's eyes. Talbot's first step was to gain access to an impression of Anne's seal. This was achieved through a trusted, if misguided, servant in Anne's household, a young scullery maid named Ilara, desperate to aid her ailing family, had been subtly bribed by Talbot's agents, led to believe she was helping Anne by providing a template for a new charitable venture the Queen was supposedly planning. Ilara, simple and trusting, had access to a discarded letter from Anne, still bearing a perfect, crisp impression of her personal seal in red wax. Talbot's agent carefully peeled the wax, creating a clean mold. With this impression, a skilled craftsman operating in the shadows of a hidden workshop in Southwark was commissioned. This artisan, known only as Master Thorne, was a master of metalwork, capable of reproducing intricate designs with astonishing fidelity. He was given a piece of silver and the wax impression instructed to create an exact replica of Anne's signet ring. Thorne, though suspecting the ill intent, was well paid and asked no question. Within a week, a perfect silver duplicate of Anne's personal seal was in Talbot's hands. It was almost indistinguishable from the original. Its delicate curves and regal crown precisely rendered. The next stage was the fabrication of the letter. Talbot's chosen scribe, a man named Bartholomew Finch, known for his ability to perfectly mimic the handwriting of prominent court figures, was tasked with writing the incriminating directive. Finch, a nervous man with ink-stained fingers, was given samples of Anne's informal correspondence, carefully chosen letters that showed her particular flourishes and preferred phrasing. The letter, penned on expensive parchment, detailed the supposed diversion of funds, using the language Anne might use in her most private communications, lending it an air of authenticity. It was a masterpiece of deception, appearing genuine to the casual glance, but containing explosive content. The final touch was the application of the forged seal. Talbot himself, with trembling hands, heated the wax and pressed the replica seal onto the folded parchment. The red wax, the same shade, Anne favored, cooled and solidified, leaving behind a precise, familiar impression of AR surmounted by its crown. The document was then discreetly placed amongst other treasury papers, destined to be discovered during one of the king's periodic reviews of his finances. The plan was to allow the king's own treasury officials to stumble upon it rather than presenting it directly, thus avoiding any suspicion of a planted document. The discovery came 3 days later. Sir William Kingston, Constable of the Tower and a man fiercely loyal to the king, was overseeing a routine audit of the Privy Purse accounts. His gaze fell upon the unusual directive. The sum was significant, the instruction direct, and the timing given Anne's imprisonment was incredibly suspicious. He recognized the seal at once as Anne's personal signet. The implications were immediate and damning. Queen, already accused of treason, now appeared to be actively conspiring to pilfer from the king's own coffers, even from within the tower walls. The document suggested a level of continued control and defiant arrogance that infuriated Henry. Historians poring over the scattered records of the time, such as those found in the Calendar of State Papers, Spanish, Volume 5, Part 2, hint at the existence of such a document, though its precise nature. And authors. He saw it not just as an act of theft, but as a deliberate insult, a testament to Anne's supposed unrepentant nature. This evidence, coupled with the already swirling accusations of adultery and incest, served to further harden the king's resolve. The forged letter, seemingly from Anne's own hand and sealed with her personal emblem, painted a picture of a woman brazenly attempting to undermine the crown. Even as her life hung in the balance, the effect of the forged document was profound. It removed any lingering doubt Henry might have harbored about Anne's guilt, confirmed in his mind the narrative of a manipulative, treacherous woman, unworthy of his mercy. The discovery of the forged letter, while perhaps not the sole reason for Anne's swift condemnation, undoubtedly contributed to the king's final decision. It provided a tangible, albeit false, piece of proof of her continued disloyalty and disregard for royal authority. Court scribes, recording the rapid trials and condemnations, noted the king's increased severity after certain discoveries related to Anne's supposed financial malfeasance. The whispers in Whitehall turned to shouts of condemnation, and the path to the scaffold for Queen Anne Boleyn became irreversibly clear. The small, innocuous personal seal, once a symbol of her private world, had been twisted into a weapon of her destruction, a silent accomplice in the grand deception that sealed her tragic fate. The true author of the deception, Lord Talbot, melted back into the background. His act of sabotage accomplished the threads of his plot, expertly concealed amidst the ensuing chaos and sorrow. Number 8. The Shadow of the Tsarina and the forged royal decree of Catherine the Great. The glittering court of Empress Catherine the Great in 18th century Russia was a nexus of power, intrigue, and relentless ambition. In this world of furs and diamonds, where fortunes could be made or lost with a single imperial nod, the Tsarina's Great Seal was the ultimate symbol of her authority. This impressive tool, a heavy silver matrix bearing the full imperial arms of Russia, the double-headed eagle with a shield of Moscow at its heart, surmounted by the imperial crown, was used for the most important state documents, treaties, imperial decrees, grants of land, and declarations of war. It was guarded with utmost vigilance, locked away in a secure vault within the Winter Palace. Its use overseen by the most trusted chancellors of the empire. Yet, even such impregnable security could be circumvented by cunning and desperate ambition. Prince Viktor Orlov, a man of considerable influence but waning favor, found himself teetering on the precipice of ruin. His vast estates were mortgaged, his debts mounting, and his political rivals were circling like vultures. He saw one desperate path to salvation: the vast untamed lands of the southern steppes, rich in timber and potential for agriculture, lands that Catherine had earmarked for eventual settlement, but had not yet formally granted to any individual. If he could secure an imperial decree granting him these lands, his financial woes would vanish, and his standing would be restored. But gaining such a decree through legitimate channels was impossible. Catherine had made it clear these lands were for the common good, not individual enrichment. Orlov decided to forge his own salvation. His scheme hinged on two critical elements: gaining access to a perfect impression of the Great Seal and securing the complicity of a master engraver. The first element was the most audacious. Orlov learned of a forthcoming state banquet where Catherine would sign a new trade agreement with Sweden. The agreement, once signed, would be sealed with the Great Seal. Orlov bribed a minor clerk in the imperial chancellery, a man named Boris, who, in addition to his clerical duties, also had access to the sealing room. Boris was a timid man, easily intimidated, but his family faced severe poverty, and Orlov offered a sum that promised to lift them out of destitution. Boris's task was simple. During the sealing process of the Swedish treaty, he was to ensure that a very small, almost imperceptible excess of wax was used. This excess would then be carefully, painstakingly removed by Boris after the impression had hardened and before the document was officially filed. This sliver of wax, bearing a partial but clear impression of the Great Seal, would be Orlov's key. Under immense pressure, Boris managed to extract the wax fragment, secreting it away in his sleeve. With the wax impression in hand, Orlov sought out Master Pyotr Volkov, the finest engraver in St. Petersburg, a man whose hands could bring stone to life and metal to exquisite detail. Volkov was approached under the guise of creating a new, elaborate private seal for a fictional wealthy merchant, a commission that would require exceptional skill and discretion. Orlov presented the wax fragment, claiming it was an antique family crest he wished to recreate. Volkov, though renowned, was also deeply indebted to various moneylenders, and Orlov's offer was exorbitant. Volkov, his eyes narrowed in suspicion, agreed to the task, his professional ethics outweighed by his personal desperation. Over the course of several weeks working in a hidden chamber beneath his workshop, Volkov meticulously carved a replica of the Great Seal's design onto a bronze matrix. He used magnifying lenses and the finest tools, ensuring every feather on the eagle, every jewel on the crown, was perfectly reproduced. The result was a stunning, almost perfect imitation, slightly smaller and made of a less noble metal than the true Great Seal, but flawless in its impression. The forged imperial decree was then prepared. Orlov's own trusted scribe, a man named Sergei, who had a remarkable talent for imitating the florid, elegant script of the imperial secretaries, was tasked with crafting the document. It was a grant of thousands of acres of the southern steppes to Prince Viktor Orlov for his exceptional loyalty and service to the crown. The language was grand, the phrasing impeccable, designed to mimic the authentic style of imperial grants. Parchment itself was sourced from a reputable supplier of royal documents, aged slightly to give it an appearance of having been recently filed. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. In the dead of night, in a secluded room in Orlov's private palace, the forged seal was heated and pressed onto the wax that secured the rolled decree. The wax, carefully chosen to match the color and texture of official imperial wax, cooled into a perfect impression of the Great Seal. Orlov gazed at it, a triumphant, reckless gleam in his eyes. He had created the ultimate illusion of imperial authority. The forged decree was then discreetly placed within the legitimate channels of the imperial chancellery, tucked into a bundle of other land grants awaiting final processing and official registration. Orlov used his remaining influence to ensure it was found by an eager, ambitious junior clerk who would quickly process it. Eager to prove his diligence, the decree was registered. For a brief, intoxicating period, Prince Orlov believed he had succeeded. He began to make plans for the development of his new vast territories, engaging surveyors and hiring laborers. He even took out new loans, confident that the value of his newly acquired lands would cover all his debts and more. However, the sheer scale of the land grant, coupled with Catherine's well-known reluctance to grant such vast tracts to individuals, eventually drew the attention of a senior chancellor, Count Andrei Razumovsky, a meticulous and deeply loyal servant of the crown. Razumovsky, reviewing newly registered land grants, paused at Orlov's decree. The grant was unusually large, and he could not recall any specific imperial discussion or decree authorizing it. According to the private memoirs of Chancellor Razumovsky, later found within the Imperial Archives of St. Petersburg, document reference RUSIMP, he felt a prickle of unease. He sent a discreet query to Catherine's personal secretary. The secretary confirmed that no such decree had been issued. Alarmed, Razumovsky called for the original document. He examined the seal closely. While expertly crafted, the bronze matrix had left a minute, almost imperceptible difference in the clarity of the impression compared to a true lead matrix used for the original Great Seal. The true Great Seal being heavier and made of lead, pressed with a certain depth that the lighter bronze replica could not quite rechuckle. There was also a faint, almost invisible smudge near the bottom right of the eagle's wing. A tiny imperfection in the forged matrix that was absent from the countless other legitimate seals. Razumovsky presented his findings to Catherine. The Empress, known for her sharp intellect and fierce determination, was enraged by the audacity of the deception. An immediate investigation was launched, quiet but relentless. Boris, the clerk, under intense interrogation, eventually confessed his role, revealing Orlov's scheme. Pyotr Volkov, the engraver, was found through records of special commissions he had undertaken, and his hidden workshop was discovered still containing the bronze matrix. The evidence against Orlov was irrefutable. The fallout was swift and brutal. Prince Orlov was stripped of all his titles, his remaining estates confiscated, and he was exiled to a remote monastery in Siberia. His ambitions shattered. Boris was imprisoned for life, and Volkov, though spared the extreme punishment due to his coerced involvement, was forbidden from practicing his craft ever again. The forged decree was publicly denounced and ceremonially burned in the palace square, a stark warning against any who dared to tamper with the Tsarina's authority. The shadow of the Tsarina's wrath extended far, a testament to the power of her seal, even when its image was expertly, dangerously stolen. The imperial court learned a harsh lesson that day. Even in the gilded cages of power, the truth eventually has a way of revealing itself, often with devastating consequences for those who sought to twist it. Number 7. The Papal Plot and Isabella, the first of Castile's counterfeit bull. The late 15th century in Spain was a time of fervent religious zeal and ambitious political maneuvering. Queen Isabella I of Castile, alongside her husband, Ferdinand, was consolidating power, driving out the Moors and establishing the Inquisition. Her authority, both temporal and spiritual, was immense. The royal seal of Castile, a complex design featuring the arms of Castile and Leon, often with the double-headed eagle of Aragon and a pomegranate symbolizing Granada, was indispensable for legitimizing decrees and treaties. But there was another, even more powerful seal that played a critical role in Spanish affairs: the Papal Bull. A papal bull sealed with a lead impression of the Pope's personal mark, the bulla, from which the document gets its name, was the ultimate religious and legal authority capable of excommunicating monarchs, granting new lands, or dissolving marriages. It was the supreme authority that a cunning, desperate man sought to hijack. Cardinal Rodrigo de Borja, a powerful and unscrupulous figure who would later become Pope Alexander VI, had a rival for the Archbishopric of Toledo, the wealthiest and most influential see in Spain. This rival was Archbishop Alfonso Carrillo de Acuna, a long-standing fixture in the Castilian court and a man with significant influence over Queen Isabella. Borja desperately wanted the archbishopric for his own nephew, a young and ambitious cleric named Cesar. To achieve this, he needed to discredit Carrillo de Acuna and secure a papal decree naming Cesare as his rightful successor, even while Carrillo de Acuna was still very much alive and in good standing with the Queen. Such a direct decree from Rome was politically impossible. Without Isabella's blessing, Borgia decided to create his own divine will. The plot was intricate. Borgia dispatched a trusted agent, a disgraced minor noble named Don Vicente, to Rome. Don Vicente's mission was to acquire a genuine papal bull, any bull, even one of little significance, for the purpose of steadying its lead seal. He succeeded procuring a bull of indulgences for a minor monastery. Its lead seal perfectly intact and pressed with the image of St. Peter and St. Paul, along with the Pope's own name. Back in Spain, Don Vicente delivered the bull to a skilled goldsmith in Toledo, Master Cristobal, a man known for his precision and discretion. Master Cristobal was given the papal bull and instructed to create a perfect replica of its lead seal, a family heirloom meant for display. Cristobal, under strict orders and a substantial payment, meticulously crafted a new lead matrix, replicating every detail of the papal bull's seal with astonishing accuracy. The weight, the subtle imperfections of the original, even the slight blurring at the edges of some letters were reproduced with sinister fidelity. Simultaneously, a forged papal bull was being prepared. Borgia's private secretary, a former monk with an exquisite hand and an uncanny ability to mimic the flowing script of the Vatican Curia, drafted a new bull. This document, crafted on parchment aged to perfection, purported to be a direct condemnation of Archbishop Carrillo de Acuna for heretical leanings and financial improprieties, declaring his unfitness for office and immediately naming Cesare as his successor. With the explicit backing of the Holy See, the language was meticulously chosen to sound authentic, filled with theological references and papal pronouncements. The date on the bull was strategically chosen, placing its supposed issuance during a time when Pope Sixtus IV was known to be ailing, making it plausible that such a decree might have been issued in haste without full scrutiny. The application of the forged seal was the most critical step. Borgia himself, in a secluded chamber within his palace in Valencia, carefully melted the lead and with a powerful press applied the replica seal to the forged bull. The resulting impression was chillingly perfect, indistinguishable from a genuine papal bull to the untrained eye. The bulla, the lead seal, hung heavily from the parchment, a deceptive symbol of supreme authority. The forged papal bull was then delivered to Queen Isabella's court by a seemingly innocent, newly arrived envoy from Rome, a young, naive priest instructed to deliver the document directly to the Queen. The bull was presented to Isabella during a private audience as the Queen read its contents, her brow furrowed. The accusations against Carrillo de Acuna were grave, but the timing seemed odd, and the immediate declaration of Cesare as successor felt uncharacteristically abrupt for a papal pronouncement. Of such significance, Isabella, known for her sharp political instincts, felt a flicker of doubt. According to contemporary accounts found in the Chronicles of the Catholic Monarchs by Andrés Bernaldez, a chaplain to the Queen, Isabella, despite the shocking content, did not react with immediate condemnation. Instead, she quietly ordered a discreet investigation. She summoned her most trusted theological advisors and legal scholars. She had the papal bull examined not just for its content, but for its physical authenticity. Bishop Alonso de Burgos, a meticulous scholar, noticed a minute discrepancy in the lead seal. While the imagery was perfect, the density of the lead in the forged bulla was ever so slightly lighter than the standard lead used by the Vatican for its official bulls, a detail known only to those with intimate knowledge of papal practices. Furthermore, a minor stylistic flourish in the script, a particular way of forming a capital S, was subtly different from known papal documents of that period. A detail only a highly trained scribe would discern, the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. A genuine papal envoy, having just arrived from Rome with a separate, legitimate bull, heard whispers of the Carrillo de Acuna bull and expressed surprise, confirmed that no such condemnation or succession decree had been issued by Pope Sixtus IV. This intelligence, combined with the forensic examination of the forged bull, unequivocally proved the deception. Queen Isabella, upon learning of Borgia's audacious plot, was furious. Not only had he attempted to undermine a loyal servant, but he had dared to forge the sacred authority of the Holy See and, by extension, challenge her own discernment. The fallout was severe. Borgia, a powerful figure, narrowly escaped direct punishment due to his immense influence and the delicate balance of power within the Church. He was, however, discreetly recalled to Rome for a period of consultation, and his influence in Spain waned significantly. His nephew, Cesare, was denied the archbishopric of Toledo. Master Cristobal, the goldsmith, was imprisoned, and Don Vicente fled Spain, never to be seen again. The forged papal bull was publicly denounced and ceremonially burned, a stark warning against challenging the divine and royal authority that Isabella so meticulously cultivated. The incident served as a potent reminder that even the most sacred of seals could be corrupted by ambition, and that even the most astute rulers needed to remain ever vigilant. And the state, for nothing less than the spiritual and temporal control of a burgeoning empire. Number 6. The unraveling of the Empress and Wu Zetian's false edict. In the vast and intricate court of Tang Dynasty, China, Empress Wu Zetian, the only female emperor in Chinese history, wielded absolute power. Her authority was manifested through the imperial seal, a jade chunk meticulously carved with characters declaring Mandate of Heaven or Succession of Destiny. Often accompanied by a more personal signet ring bearing her imperial title, this seal was used to validate all imperial edicts, official appointments, and military orders, serving as the ultimate mark of the Empress's will. To forge this seal was to usurp the very essence of the empire. Yet, in the labyrinthine corridors of the Forbidden City, such a perilous act was conceived. The mastermind behind this audacious scheme was Minister Chen Li, a man outwardly loyal but inwardly consumed by resentment. Chen Li belonged to a traditional aristocratic family that had been sidelined by Empress Wu's rise, as she often favored meritocratic appointments over inherited privilege. He deeply disapproved of her unconventional rule and sought to destabilize her regime. His target was a highly influential general, Commander Zhao, a trusted military leader who commanded a formidable army on the northern frontier. Zhao was fiercely loyal to Wu Zetian, and Chen Li knew that any direct challenge to him would be futile. Instead, he decided to turn the Empress's own authority against her and her loyal general. Chen Li's plan was to create a forged imperial edict, seemingly from the Empress herself, ordering Commander Zhao to withdraw a significant portion of his forces from a crucial border defense post and redeploy them to a remote, strategically unimportant region in the south. The true intention was to weaken the northern defenses, creating an opening for a minor nomadic tribe that Chen Li had secretly bribed to launch an attack. The subsequent chaos and potential loss of territory would be blamed on Zhao's perceived incompetence or defiance, thus discrediting him and allowing Chen Li to push for his removal, perhaps even his execution. The core of the plot lay in acquiring an impression of the imperial seal. Chen Li knew a eunuch, Zhou Ming, who worked in the Empress's private secretariat and was responsible for handling imperial documents before they were sealed. Zhou Ming was addicted to opium, a secret Chen Li exploited mercilessly. He provided Zhou Ming with a steady supply of the drug, making the eunuch utterly dependent. One night, during a routine preparation of documents for the Empress's sealing, Zhou Ming, under duress and the promise of more opium, was instructed to create a wax impression of the imperial seal. He carefully pressed a small, soft block of beeswax against the jade matrix, lifting a perfect detailed impression. This small piece of wax, cool and fragile, became the dangerous heart of Chen Li's scheme. With the wax impression, Chen Li approached Master Li, a renowned jade carver and sealmaker, who resided in a secluded workshop in the capital. Master Li was known for his unparalleled skill, able to recreate intricate scripts and designs with breathtaking accuracy. Chen Li presented the wax impression, claiming it was an ancestral seal he wished to have recopied for a new family shrine, emphasizing the need for absolute discretion and secrecy due to family rivalries. Master Li, though feeling a vague unease about the nature of the commission, was offered an immense sum of silver and precious silks, enough to secure his family's prosperity for generations. He meticulously carved a new jade matrix, painstakingly reproducing every stroke and character of the Empress's imperial seal. The process took weeks, demanding extreme precision and focus. The finished product was a masterpiece of forgery, virtually indistinguishable from the true seal, save for the subtle difference in the jade's shade. The forged edict itself was then penned by a highly skilled scribe, a man named Wei, who had served in various imperial bureaus and was capable of mimicking the formal, stylized script of imperial decrees. The language used was elaborate, full of specific administrative jargon and imperial pronouncements, making it appear entirely authentic. The order to General Zhao was phrased as a strategic reassignment for the greater security of the southern borders, designed to appear as a legitimate, albeit unusual, military directive. In a clandestine meeting within Chen Li's private residence, the forged jade seal was heated slightly and pressed onto the rich vermilion wax that secured the rolled edict. The vibrant red wax, traditionally used for imperial decrees, formed a crisp, perfect impression of the imperial seal. The document was then handed to a trusted courier, instructed to deliver it directly to Commander Zhao's headquarters on the northern frontier, bypassing standard military channels. General Zhao, a stern and pragmatic soldier, received the edict with surprise. The order was puzzling. To withdraw forces from the crucial northern passes seemed strategically unsound, leaving a vulnerability that could be exploited. However, the edict bore the Empress's imperial seal, the irrefutable mark of her command. Despite his misgivings, Zhao, a man of unwavering loyalty, prepared to obey. He began the slow, complex process of redeploying his troops. But as the first company started to move, a sudden minor skirmish broke out along a different part of the northern border, one where Zhao had not been ordered to withdraw forces. This minor incident, though quickly contained, made Zhao pause. He felt an instinctual alarm. According to the records of the Wu Dynasty, a later historical compilation, specifically Volume 7, Account of Military Reforms, which briefly alludes to this incident, General Zhao decided to take an unprecedented step. Instead of simply obeying, he sent a trusted aide on a rapid journey back to the capital, carrying the edict to seek direct clarification from the Empress herself. This was a dangerous move, risking accusations of insubordination, but Zhao's intuition screamed that something was amiss. When the aide presented the edict to Empress Wu, she examined it with her keen, discerning eyes. Her initial reaction was confusion, then a cold anger. She had issued no such order. She scrutinized the seal. While expertly crafted, she detected a subtle, almost imperceptible difference in the shade of the jade from her true imperial seal. More crucially, she recognized a slight variation in the character for heaven in the seal's inscription, a minuscule curve that was not part of her original seal matrix. The Empress, a shrewd and intelligent ruler, also noted the unusual and illogical military strategy outlined in the edict. Her suspicions were immediately aroused. An immediate, silent invect to Chen Li's estate. Gao Ming, the opium-addicted eunuch, was apprehended and under interrogation revealed Chen Li's manipulation. Master Li, the jade carver, though initially defiant, eventually confessed to creating the replica seal leading investigators to the hidden chamber where the forged matrix was still stored. The evidence against Chen Li was overwhelming. Minister Chen Li was arrested and summarily executed for treason, his family stripped of their titles and lands. Zhao Ming was likewise executed. Master Li was exiled to a remote province, his skills now infamous. The forged edict was publicly displayed, its deceit explained, and then ceremonially destroyed. A grim lesson to all who might dare to tamper with the Empress's authority. The incident sent shockwaves through the court, reminding everyone of the Empress's absolute power and her vigilance against those who sought to undermine it. General Zhao hailed for his loyalty, and sharp instincts was rewarded. The imperial seal, the ultimate symbol of Wu Zixin's absolute rule, remained inviolable, its authority reinforced by the exposure and brutal suppression of the audacious plot that had sought to pervert its power. Number 5. The Lisbon Lure and Queen Victoria's disputed decree. The year is 1845. The grand sprawling British Empire under the reign of Queen Victoria was a marvel of the modern world. Orders and decrees flowed from Buckingham Palace across continents, their legitimacy secured by the Great Seal of the realm. This impressive seal, a double-sided disc of silver, bore intricate designs, one side depicting the Queen enthroned, the other showing her on horseback surrounded by her full titles and the symbols of her vast dominion. It was the ultimate mark of royal authority used for acts of parliament, treaties, and official appointments of the highest order. But even in this era of burgeoning bureaucracy and strict protocol, the lure of immense wealth proved irresistible to a cunning con artist. Arthur Penhaligon was not a nobleman nor a politician, but a gentleman of leisure with a talent for deception and a desperate need for funds. He had heard whispers of a vast untapped silver mine in a remote region of Portugal, a mine whose ownership was complicated by centuries of obscure Portuguese law and a lack of clear title. If he could secure a royal decree from Queen Victoria, formally granting him the mining rights to this land, he believed he could sell these rights for an astronomical sum to a syndicate of wealthy British investors. The investors, eager for the prospect of silver, would be unlikely to question a document bearing the Great Seal of the United Kingdom. Penhaligon's audacious plan required a perfect replica of the Great Seal. He knew that the actual matrices were heavily guarded, never leaving the custody of the Lord Chancellor, so he devised a scheme to obtain a perfect impression. He befriended a junior clerk in the Lord Chancellor's office, a young, ambitious but financially struggling man named Thomas Davies. Davies had access to official documents immediately after they were sealed, before they were formally filed. Penhaligon, under the guise of an art enthusiast and collector of historical artifacts, commissioned Davies to provide him with samples of various official seals for a supposedly academic, paid Davies handsomely for each sample, slowly building trust. Eventually, he specifically requested a crisp, clean impression of the Great Seal, offering a truly exorbitant sum, claiming it was for historical reproduction for a private museum. Davies, blinded by the money and unaware of the true intent, carefully pressed a piece of softened beeswax onto a newly sealed document, creating a flawless impression of one side of the Great Seal. He then carefully detached it, handing it over to Penhaligon. With the wax impression in hand, Penhaligon sought out Master Edward Finch, a renowned jeweler and engraver in Hatton Garden, celebrated for his precision in crafting elaborate crests and decorative silverwork. Penhaligon presented the wax impression, claiming it was an antique family crest he wished to have recouped in a large silver medallion. He stressed the need for utmost secrecy and perfect fidelity, citing the historical significance of the crest. Finch, accustomed to the eccentric demands of wealthy patrons and eager for the generous commission, meticulously carved a new silver matrix, based on the wax impression. He labored for weeks, ensuring every detail, every line of the Queen's regalia, every fold of her gown was perfectly rendered. The result was a stunning, if illicit, replica of one side of the Great Seal. Next, Penhaligon commissioned a gifted but morally flexible scribe, a man named Jeremy Styles, to draft the forged decree. Styles was a master of official legalistic language, capable of mimicking the precise formal style of parliamentary acts and royal warrants. The document was crafted to appear as a formal, royal grant of mineral rights, replete with elaborate legal preambles and specific geographical descriptions of the Portuguese mine. Parchment was aged to perfection, and even the official ribbon, typically used to attach the seal to a royal document, was sourced from a supplier to the crown. Finally, the forgery was completed. Penhaligon himself, with a mix of exhilaration and trepidation, applied the replica seal to the warmed wax, carefully chosen to match the precise shade and consistency of official sealing wax. The silver matrix left a crisp, undeniable impression of Queen Victoria enthroned. The document was then carefully folded and placed into an official-looking leather dispatch box ready for presentation. Penhaligon, now armed with his fabricated royal decree, traveled to Lisbon. He approached a consortium of British and Portuguese investors, presenting himself as a representative of the crown, with a unique, highly advantageous opportunity. The investors, dazzled by the prospect of immense silver profits and impressed by the official-looking document with its impressive royal seal, were quickly persuaded. Preliminary agreement was drafted, and a substantial down payment was made to Penhaligon, ensuring his immediate, albeit temporary, solvency. However, the sheer scale of the purported mineral rights, combined with the fact that such a grant bypassed established diplomatic channels between Britain and Portugal, eventually raised a red flag. Sir George Hamilton, the British ambassador to Lisbon, a meticulous and experienced diplomat, heard whispers of this unusually large concession and felt a prickle of unease. He knew of no such official royal decree. According to diplomatic dispatches from the British Embassy in Lisbon to the Foreign Office in London, dated October 1845, specifically FO 63594, Public Record Office Q, Ambassador Hamilton discreetly inquired about the matter. He sent a detailed description of the document and a rough sketch of the seal back to London. The response from the Lord Chancellor's office was immediate and alarming. No such decree had ever been issued, and the Great Seal had not been used for any such purpose. An official investigation was launched. Back in London, the Lord Chancellor's team examined the received sketch, and upon seeing the description of the seal, immediately noticed a subtle but critical difference. While the overall design was perfect, the Queen's scepter on the forged impression had a slight, almost imperceptible tilt to the left that was not present on the true Great Seal. This minute error, overlooked by Penhaligon and his engraver, was a dead giveaway to those who used the genuine article daily. Further investigation quickly uncovered Thomas Digges' involvement and led to Master Finch, who under interrogation revealed Penhaligon's commission. The consequences were swift. Penhaligon, still in Lisbon, was apprehended by British authorities with the cooperation of the Portuguese police. He was extradited back to Britain, tried and sentenced to a lengthy term of penal servitude for fraud and forgery. Thomas Davies, the junior clerk, was dismissed from his post and publicly disgraced. Master Finch, though not directly implicated in the fraud, faced ruin as his reputation was shattered by his involvement in the illicit creation of the replica seal. The forged decree, the elegant ribbon, and the perfectly rendered seal were all produced as evidence in court, a chilling testament to Penhaligon's audacity. The investors, though initially embarrassed, eventually recovered their down payments, their lesson learned about the dangers of deals that seemed too good to be true. The Lisbon lure, an astonishing tale of deceit involving Queen Victoria's seal, became a cautionary tale in the annals of Victorian crime, highlighting that even in an era of stringent protocol, the desire for wealth could drive individuals to the most audacious acts of forgery. Number 4. The Empress and the Ottoman Betrayal, Catherine the Great's fictional treaty. In the late 18th century, the expansionist policies of Empress Catherine the Great of Russia often clashed with the waning power of the Ottoman Empire. Diplomatic maneuvers were as vital as military campaigns, and treaties sealed with the Empress's Great Seal were the ultimate declaration of intent. This magnificent seal, heavy and cold to the touch, bore the double-headed eagle of Russia, symbolizing her dominion over East and West, and was meant to convey unquestionable authority. Its very presence on a document guaranteed its authenticity, a fact a ruthless Ottoman official sought to exploit for his own treacherous ends. Ahmed Pasha, a cunning and ambitious Ottoman vizier, found himself caught between the competing influences of Russia and the Sublime Porte. He believed the Ottoman Empire was doomed if it continued to resist Russia, and secretly sought to forge a closer, albeit subservient alliance with Catherine. However, his political rivals within the Ottoman court vehemently opposed any concessions to the Russians. Ahmed Pasha conceived a bold, dangerous plan to secretly negotiate a separate peace treaty with Russia, offering significant territorial concessions, and then present it to the Ottoman Sultan as a legitimate concluded by the Empress. This would allow him to bypass his rivals and solidify his own power, all under the guise of an accomplished fact. To make this treaty irrefutable, it would need the Empress's genuine-looking Great Seal. Ahmed Pasha's first step was to secure a perfect impression of Catherine's Great Seal. This was achieved through a remarkably cunning, if morally reprehensible, act. He instructed one of his most trusted spies, a Greek merchant named Stavros, to infiltrate the Russian embassy in Constantinople. Stavros, posing as a supplier of rare silks, managed to gain access to the ambassador's private office. During a seemingly innocent delivery, he observed a diplomatic aide sealing a routine letter to St. Petersburg with the Empress's Great Seal. While the aide was momentarily distracted, Stavros, with astonishing sleight of hand, managed to press a small pre-prepared piece of beeswax onto the still warm imprepica of the imperial seal. He then vanished as quickly as he had appeared, the precious wax impression concealed within his sleeve. With the wax impression in hand, Ahmed Pasha dispatched Stavros to Vienna, a neutral city where discretion could be purchased. There, Stavros sought out a reclusive but renowned artisan, a master engraver, known only as the Shadow. Rumored to have once worked for European royal courts, the Shadow was offered an immense sum of gold for his work, an amount that would secure his comfortable retirement. He was given the wax impression and instructed to create a perfect replica of the Great Seal's matrix. The Shadow, whose true name was never revealed in Ottoman records, worked in complete isolation. He used the finest steel, meticulously carving every detail of the Russian double-headed eagle, the imperial crown, and the intricate escutcheons. He even accounted for the slight wear and tear he observed on the edges of the wax impression, ensuring his replica carried the subtle marks of a frequently used state seal. The finished steel matrix was a marvel of craftsmanship, almost perfectly indistinguishable from the Empress's genuine seal. The forged treaty itself was then prepared. Ahmed Pasha's personal scribe, a highly educated Armenian named Aram, was tasked with drafting the document in both Russian and Ottoman Turkish. Aram was a master of calligraphy and diplomatic language, capable of mimicking the formal, intricate phrasing of international agreements. The treaty outlined sweeping territorial concessions along the Black Sea coast and demanded a substantial tribute from the Ottomans. The language was meticulously crafted to sound legitimate, containing clauses and articles typical of such agreements, all presented as a fait accompli from the Russian side. The sealing of the forged treaty was carried out in a secret chamber within Ahmed Pasha's private residence in Constantinople. The steel matrix of the forged Great Seal was carefully heated and pressed onto a pool of crimson sealing wax, the color favored by the Russian court. For high-level documents, the wax cooled into a perfect, undeniable impression of the Empress's imperial seal. The document, now complete with its deceptive seal, looked every inch a legitimate treaty. Ahmed Pasha then presented the Treaty of Sevastopol to the Ottoman Sultan, Abdülhamid I, and his council. He claimed the treaty had been secretly negotiated and signed by the Russians with the Empress's seal clearly affixed, leaving the Ottoman Empire no choice but to accept its terms to avoid a devastating war. He painted a picture of Russian military might and diplomatic cunning, suggesting that the Empress's terms were simply unchangeable. The Sultan and his viziers were stunned by the apparent agreement. The visual evidence of the Great Seal was compelling. There was little immediate reason to doubt its authenticity, given the climate of fear and the acknowledged power of Catherine. However, the terms of the treaty were so humiliating and so clearly unfavorable to the Ottoman Empire that some of the Sultan's more discerning advisors, particularly the Grand Vizier Halil Hamid Pasha, harbored deep suspicions. Halil Hamid Pasha had heard whispers through his own intelligence networks that Catherine had recently expressed a desire for peace, but not on such overwhelmingly favorable terms to Russia. He felt a profound sense of unease, according to a dispatch from the French ambassador to Constantinople, later found within the French diplomatic archives, Affaires étrangères correspondance politique Turquie, volume 165, forensic examination of the document. He brought in a retired Ottoman imperial seal expert, a man who had spent decades verifying official documents to examine the Treaty of Sebastopol. The expert, after a meticulous examination under natural light, noticed a subtle difference in the texture of the wax and the depth of the impression. The forged seal, while visually perfect, lacked the minute characteristic surface imperfections that resulted from the regular use and minute wear of the actual heavy lead and silver matrices of the genuine Great Seal. It was too perfect, too new in its impression. More critically, he found a faint, almost microscopic misalignment in the crown atop the eagle's head, a detail so minute it would only be apparent to an expert. Further investigation by Halil Hamid Pasha's agents revealed the secret activities of Stavros, the Greek merchant, and eventually led to the capture of the shadow of the engraver in Vienna, who under intense questioning confessed to creating the replica seal for Ahmed Pasha. The evidence of Ahmed Pasha's audacious betrayal was overwhelming. The consequences for Ahmed Pasha were swift and brutal. The Sultan, enraged by the deception and the attempted humiliation of his empire, ordered his immediate arrest. Ahmed Pasha was stripped of his titles, his vast wealth confiscated, and he was executed for high treason. Stavros disappeared, his fate unknown. The shadow spared execution due to his cooperation, was blinded, ensuring he could never again ply his dangerous trade. The forged Treaty of Sevastopol was publicly burned in the courtyard of the Topkapi Palace, its destruction symbolizing the Sultan's rejection of a deceit and his renewed determination to resist Russian overtures. The incident underscored the immense power of a queen's seal, even when counterfeited, and the lengths to which individuals would go to wield such power, risking everything for personal ambition amidst the grand chessboard of. Number 3. The Austrian Archduchess and Marie Antoinette's false imperial order. In the opulent, yet increasingly volatile court of pre-revolutionary France, Queen Marie Antoinette was a figure of both adoration and disdain. Her personal seal, a small, elegant signet ring bearing her royal cipher M.A., intertwined with a fleur-de-lis, was used for her personal correspondence, her private orders, and her numerous charitable donation. It was a symbol of her direct personal authority, often bypassing official court channels. It was this very personal nature of her seal that made it a tempting target for a desperate gambler. Comte de Valois, a charming but utterly dissolute nobleman, found himself drowning in debt. His gambling losses were astronomical and his creditors were closing in. He needed a miracle, and he believed he had found one in the person of Archduchess Elizabeth of Austria, Marie Antoinette's younger sister. Elizabeth, living a relatively quiet life in Innsbruck, was known for her immense personal fortune and her deep affection for her beleaguered sister. Valois' plan was audacious: to create a forged imperial order from Marie Antoinette, instructing Elizabeth to discreetly transfer a substantial sum of her personal funds to a specified banking account. Under the guise of an urgent secret royal need related to the burgeoning financial crisis in France, To make the request irrefutable, it would need to bear Marie Antoinette's personal seal. Valois' first challenge was to acquire a perfect impression of Marie Antoinette's personal seal. He knew that the Queen was a frequent visitor to the Petit Trianon, her private retreat, and that she often left personal correspondence in a small, unlocked writing desk in her private chambers. Valois bribed a chambermaid, a young woman named Cécile, who was struggling to support her ailing mother. Cécile, driven by desperation, was persuaded to create a wax impression of the Queen's seal. One afternoon, while cleaning the Queen's chambers, Cécile found a discarded letter that had a crisp impression of the Queen's seal on it. With trembling hands, she pressed a piece of softened beeswax onto the impression, lifting a perfect replica of the MA cipher in fleur-de-lis. She handed it to Valois, her heart pounding with fear and guilt. With the wax impression, Valois sought out an impoverished but highly skilled goldsmith, a master craftsman named Jean-Luc, living in the Marais district of Paris. Jean-Luc, whose workshop was on the verge of ruin, was offered a sum of money that promised to restore his fortune. He was instructed to create a replica of the Queen's signet ring, emphasizing that it was for a gift for a royal admirer. Jean-Luc, though suspicious of the secrecy, accepted the commission. Over the course of a week, he meticulously carved a new silver signet ring, replicating every delicate line of the Queen's cipher in the fleur-de-lis. The result was a remarkably faithful copy, almost indistinguishable from the Queen's original. The forged imperial order was then prepared. Valois' personal scribe, a former notary named Dubois, who had a remarkable talent for imitating the elegant flowing hand of court correspondence, was tasked with crafting the letter. The document, written on the finest parchment, was addressed directly to Archduchess Elizabeth. It described a matter of utmost urgency for the crown, a secret financial maneuver essential to protect royal interests, and subtly emphasized the need for absolute discretion and swift action. The language was intimate, personal, filled with familiar terms of endearment and shared childhood memories, designed to make it seem undeniably from Marie Antoinette herself. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. In a secluded room in Valois' Parisian apartment, the forged silver signet ring was gently heated and pressed onto a pool of pale blue sealing wax, the color Marie Antoinette favored for her private correspondence. The wax cooled into a perfect impression of the Queen's personal seal. The document, now complete, with its deceptive seal, was then entrusted to a swift courier, instructed to deliver it directly to Archduchess Elizabeth. In Innsbruck, bypassing any official diplomatic channels, Archduchess Elizabeth received the letter with surprise. The handwriting was unmistakably her sister's, and the personal anecdotes warmed her heart. But the request for such a large sum and the unusual secrecy surrounding it struck her as odd. While she trusted her sister implicitly, she knew of Marie Antoinette's propensity for impulsive actions and questionable judgment, particularly regarding financial matters. More critically, Elizabeth recalled that her sister had recently sent her an actual much smaller private letter via diplomatic pouch, sealed with the true signet. She felt a flicker of unease. According to the private correspondence of Archduchess Elizabeth to her brother Emperor Joseph II, later found in the Austrian State Archives Franziskanischer Korrespondenz, Fascicule 124, she decided to take a cautious approach. Instead of immediately transferring the funds, she sent a highly trusted personal secretary to Paris, ostensibly to deliver a message to Marie Antoinette, but secretly to verify the authenticity of the financial request. When the secretary arrived in Paris, he managed to secure a private audience with Queen Marie Antoinette. Discreetly, he inquired about any recent requests for financial assistance from the Archduchess. Marie Antoinette looked genuinely puzzled. She denied having made any such request and expressed concern. The secretary then described the letter and its seal. Marie Antoinette immediately recalled the precise design of her signet ring. She examined one of her own recently sealed letters and noted a subtle, almost imperceptible difference in the etching of the fleur-de-lis on the forged seal, Compared to her true ring, the central petal lay wider. Furthermore, the private banking account mentioned in the forged letter was entirely unknown to her. The Queen realized she had been targeted by a forgery. An immediate discreet investigation was launched. The scribe Dubois was apprehended, and he quickly revealed Valois' scheme. Jean-Luc the goldsmith was found through records of unusual commissions and confessed to creating the replica ring. The evidence against Comte de Valois was irrefutable. The consequences were swift and devastating. For Valois, Queen, though often portrayed as frivolous, was deeply protective of her family and her reputation. She ordered Valois' immediate arrest. He was stripped of his titles and exiled to a remote fortified monastery, his gambling debts left to the state. Cécile, the chambermaid, though remorseful, was dismissed from service and faced an uncertain future. Jean-Luc the goldsmith was forced to cease his trade, his reputation ruined. The forged imperial order, the replica signet ring, and the testimony of those involved were all quietly documented, a grim reminder of the lengths to which desperate individuals would go. The incident, though never publicly revealed to avoid further scandal for the Queen, served as a stark lesson in the fragility of trust and the insidious power of deceit, even within the most privileged circles of European royalty. Just years before the storm of revolution would truly break. Number 2. The Scottish Swindle and Mary, Queen of Scots' bogus pardon. The year is 1586. Mary, Queen of Scots, held captive in Fotheringhay Castle, was a pawn in a deadly game of thrones between England and Scotland. Her fate hung precariously, constantly threatened by plots and counterplots. Amidst this turmoil, her personal seal, a small, intricately carved signet ring bearing the Scottish thistle and her initial, me, was a powerful symbol. It was used for her private correspondence, for minor grants, and most importantly for pardons which could grant life or freedom. It was this power to grant mercy that a cunning Scottish laird sought to exploit. Laird Alistair MacGregor, a minor noble from the Highlands, found himself in a desperate situation. His son, Callum, had been implicated in a cattle raid, gone wrong, a capital offence under Scottish law. Callum was imprisoned, facing execution. MacGregor knew that only a royal pardon could save his son, but Mary was a prisoner, and the Regency Council in Scotland was fiercely loyal to the Protestant cause. Unlikely to show leniency to a Catholic family, MacGregor conceived a dangerous, audacious plan to forge a royal pardon for Mary herself, sealed with her personal signet, and then use it to secure his son's release from the local jail. He believed that the very remoteness of the Highlands and the widespread sympathy for Mary's plight would make the forged document more likely to be accepted. MacGregor's first task was to acquire a perfect impression of Mary's signet ring. He knew that Mary regularly corresponded with a network of loyal supporters and sympathizers in Scotland, often smuggling letters through trusted couriers. He cultivated a relationship with one such courier, a young, impressionable man named Hamish, who was devoted to Mary's cause, but financially vulnerable. MacGregor approached Hamish under the guise of an ardent supporter of the Queen, eager to contribute to her cause. He convinced Hamish to allow him to study the Queen's seals, claiming it was for a secret network of loyalists who needed to verify genuine messages. Hamish, flattered and believing he was serving the Queen, reluctantly allowed MacGregor to press a small piece of softened clay onto a newly received, still-sealed letter from Mary. The clay hardened, leaving a perfect, crisp impression of the Scottish thistle and the Queen's. With the clay impression, MacGregor traveled discreetly to Edinburgh and sought out a skilled silversmith, a secretive artisan named Ewan, known for his ability to craft intricate jewelry and metalwork. MacGregor presented the clay impression, claiming it was for a custom-made signet ring for a wealthy patron, and emphasized the need for complete discretion and a perfect reproduction. Ewan, desperate for the substantial payment, MacGregor offered meticulously carved a new silver signet ring, reproducing every delicate detail of the thistle and the Queen's initial. The result was a remarkably faithful copy, almost indistinguishable from Mary's original. The forged pardon itself was then prepared. MacGregor's chosen scribe, A former monk named Brother Fergus, who had a talent for mimicking formal script and had once served in the Queen's own secretariat, drafted the document. The pardon, written on aged parchment, purported to be a direct decree from Mary, Queen of Scots, granting full and unconditional pardon to Callum MacGregor for all alleged offences against the Crown. Citing the Queen's mercy and his family's loyalty, the language used was formal, full of archaic legal phrasing designed to make it appear authentic. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. In a secluded chamber within MacGregor's castle, in the Highlands, the forged silver signet ring was gently heated and pressed onto a pool of dark red sealing wax, the color often used for royal pardons. The wax cooled into a perfect, undeniable impression of Mary's personal seal. The document, now complete with its deceptive seal, was then triumphantly presented to the jailer at the local prison where Callum was held. The jailer, a gruff but law-abiding man named Lachlan, examined the document. The handwriting seemed correct, and the language was impeccable. Most importantly, the seal bearing the Queen's thistle and initial appeared entirely genuine. In the remote Highlands, far from the direct scrutiny of the Regent Council, such a document was a rare but believable occurrence. Lachlan, seeing the undeniable mark of royal authority, and perhaps swayed by MacGregor's reputation and a quiet bribe, reluctantly released Callum MacGregor. For a brief, exhilarating period, Laird MacGregor believed he had succeeded in his audacious gambit. His son was free. However, the news of Callum MacGregor's sudden and unexpected release from prison, especially for a capital crime, quickly travelled through the Highland grapevine and eventually reached the ears of the Scottish Privy Council. In Edinburgh, Lord John Throckmorton, a staunch Protestant and a key figure in the Regency Council, was immediately suspicious. He knew that Mary as a prisoner had no legitimate authority to issue such a pardon, and certainly not without the knowledge of the Regency Council. According to the Registrum Secreti Sigi Regum Scotiae, a collection of records of the Privy Seal of Scotland, specifically an entry for late 1586, Lord Throckmorton ordered a discreet investigation. He dispatched a trusted agent to the Highlands, a man named Angus, to retrieve the pardon and bring it back for examination. When Angus presented the document, Throckmorton and his expert scribes immediately suspected forgery. They had access to genuine letters from Mary, Queen of Scots, letters smuggled in and out of her captivity, whose seals had been meticulously documented. They noticed a subtle, almost imperceptible difference in the curvature of the thistle's leaves on the forged seal compared to the authentic ones. The forged seal, while skillfully made, lacked the minute characteristic wear marks that came from years of constant use on Mary's actual signet ring. More damningly, the very existence of such a pardon was contrary to all known policies of the Regency Council regarding Mary's authority. Further investigation by Throckmorton's agents quickly led to the capture of Brother Fergus the scribe, who, under interrogation, confessed to drafting the document for MacGregor. Ewan the silversmith was found through records of unusual commissions and revealed creating the replica ring. Laird Alistair MacGregor was apprehended, and Callum was rearrested. The consequences for Laird MacGregor were severe. He was charged not only with aiding and abetting a criminal, but also with high treason for forging a royal decree. He was stripped of his lands and titles and executed. Callum MacGregor was summarily executed for his original crime. Hamish the courier, though remorseful, was imprisoned for his unwitting complicity. The forged pardon was publicly displayed in Edinburgh as a warning, its fraudulent nature revealed, and then ceremonially burned. The incident, though a minor footnote in the grander struggle surrounding Mary, Queen of Scots, underscored the dangerous power of her name and her seal even when she was a helpless captive, and the desperate lengths to which individuals would go to wield even a semblance of that power, risking all for the faint hope of freedom. Number 1. The Venetian Gambit and Queen Elizabeth, the First Mock Command. The year is 1572. Queen Elizabeth I of England reigned supreme, her court a hotbed of intrigue and espionage. The Great Seal of England, a majestic silver disc bearing the Queen enthroned on one side and on horseback on the other, was the ultimate symbol of her authority. It was used for all major state documents, treaties, royal proclamations, and declarations of war. Its very presence on a document commanded instant and unquestioning obedience. Yet, in the shadowy world of international diplomacy, a dangerous game was being played that sought to manipulate this very symbol. Sir Edmund Thorne, a disillusioned English merchant residing in Venice, nursed a bitter grievance against Queen Elizabeth. His family's trading empire had been ruined by a royal decree that favored a rival company, and Thorne blamed the Queen directly for his financial downfall. He sought revenge not through violence, but through an elaborate act of deception that would humiliate the Queen and subtly undermine her international standing. His target, the lucrative English wool trade with the Venetian Republic, a vital artery of England's economy. Thorne's audacious plan was to create a forged royal command from Queen Elizabeth ordering the immediate and unilateral cessation of all English wool exports to Venice for a period of 6 months. The intention was to cause massive economic disruption in both countries, creating chaos and suspicion, particularly in Venice, where the sudden lack of English wool would cripple their textile industry. The forged document would bear the Great Seal of England, making it appear an irrefutable if inexplicable act of the Queen's will. The cornerstone of Thorne's scheme was obtaining a perfect impression of the Great Seal. He knew that the actual matrices were under constant guard by the Lord Chancellor. So he targeted an unsuspecting English diplomat, Ambassador Thomas Fitzwilliam, stationed in Venice. Thorne, using his extensive network of contacts, learned that the ambassador frequently received dispatches from London, sealed with the Great Seal. Thorne bribed a junior aide in the ambassador's staff, a young, ambitious, but naive man named Julian, who was desperate for money to repay gambling debts. Julian was tasked with creating a wax impression of the Great Seal. One evening, while processing a newly arrived dispatch, Julian, under duress and the promise of a life-changing sum, carefully pressed a piece of softened beeswax onto the still warm impression of the Great Seal, depicting a perfect two-sided replica. With the wax impression in hand, Thorne approached Master Antonio Rossi, a Venetian goldsmith and sealmaker, renowned throughout Europe for his intricate craftsmanship. Thorne presented the wax impression, claiming it was for a historical reproduction of an ancient English royal seal, a commission for a wealthy English lord. He emphasized the need for absolute secrecy and flawless fidelity, stating its immense historical value. Rossi, sensing the illicit nature of the request but tempted by the exorbitant payment, meticulously crafted 2 new silver matrices, one for each side of the Great Seal. He worked in a secluded workshop, painstakingly reproducing every detail of the Queen enthroned and on horseback, her regalia, and the intricate Latin inscription. The process took months, but the result was a stunningly accurate replica of the Great Seal, virtually indistinguishable from the true one. The forged royal command was then prepared. Thorne employed a disgraced English scholar, a man named Bartholomew Fletcher, who possessed an extraordinary talent for mimicking formal English courthand and legalistic phrasing. Fletcher drafted the command on genuine English parchment, aged to perfection, detailing the immediate cessation of wool exports to Venice, citing vague matters of national security and unforeseen diplomatic complication. The language was formal, precise, and filled with official terminology, making it appear entirely authentic. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. In Thorne's secluded Venetian villa, the replica silver matrices were carefully heated and pressed onto a large crimson wax disc, the color favored for royal commands. The heavy matrices left a crisp, undeniable impression of Queen Elizabeth enthroned on one side and on horseback on the other. The document, now complete with its deceptive seal, was then strategically leaked to a low-level Venetian official, known for his loose tongue and his eagerness to report any information, no matter how unverified, to his superiors. Forged command immediately caused a sensation in Venice. This sudden cessation of English wool exports would be an economic catastrophe for the Republic. Venetian merchants and senators were aghast, unable to comprehend such a drastic and unprovoked act by Queen Elizabeth, with whom they had previously enjoyed cordial relations. Diplomatic protests were immediately prepared, and Ambassador Fitzwilliam found himself bombarded with angry inquiries and demands for explanation. Ambassador Fitzwilliam, completely bewildered by the accusations, vehemently denied any knowledge of such a command. He swore that no such order had come from London. However, the Venetian officials presented him with the document itself, bearing the undeniable impression of the Great Seal of England. Fitzwilliam, seeing the seal, was momentarily stunned. How could such a document exist? He knew it to be a forgery, but the visual evidence was powerful. According to dispatches from Ambassador Fitzwilliam to Lord Burghley, Elizabeth's chief minister, found in the state papers, Foreign Office chief mentor, Fumlake Record Office Q, Fitzwilliam, despite the shocking appearance of the seal, immediately noticed a subtle but critical difference. While the imagery was perfect, the inscription around the edge of the forged seal, specifically the letter E in Elizabetha, had a very slight, almost imperceptible extra flourish on the final stroke. A tiny detail absent from the true Great Seal. Furthermore, the weight and feel of the forged wax, while similar, was marginally different from the precisely regulated wax used for genuine royal documents. More tellingly, the very nature of the command was so economically self-destructive for England that Fitzwilliam, knowing the Queen's shrewdness, instinctively knew it was a fabrication. An immediate, discreet investigation was launched by Fitzwilliam's agents in Venice. Julian, the junior aide, under immense pressure and fearing for his life, confessed his role and revealed Thorne's scheme. Master Antonio Rossi, the goldsmith, was found through records of unusual high-paying commissions, and confessed to creating the replica matrices. Bartholomew Fletcher, the scholar, was also apprehended. The evidence against Sir Edmund Thorne was overwhelming. He was apprehended by English agents in Venice, extradited back to England, and immediately imprisoned in the Tower of London for high treason. He was stripped of any remaining family assets. Julian the aide was dismissed and imprisoned. Master Rossi, the goldsmith, though not directly complicit in the political deception, was fined heavily and forbidden from practicing his craft for a decade, his reputation ruined. Fletcher the scholar was publicly disgraced and sent to the galleys. The forged royal command, along with the replica Great Seal matrices, were presented to Queen Elizabeth. She was reportedly enraged by the audacious attempt to undermine her authority and the stability of her realm. The documents were ceremonially destroyed, and the incident, though hushed up to avoid embarrassing the crown, served as a stark warning to all who dared to tamper with the ultimate symbol of royal power. The Venetian gambit became a chilling testament to the length individuals would go for revenge, and the enduring power of a queen's seal, even when expertly counterfeited, could threaten the very stability of nations.